Howdy, Shasta College. Human 4, Film Studies. How you doing? How was your weekend? We've got another week, and then I think we've got a break next week for Thanksgiving. So I know you have a paper due today. I don't think I'm going to sign another paper this week, so you'll have this time off, and you'll have freedom next week. And then we come back, and you'll do a research paper, and then you'll have to do your your journal. Please keep up with those journals. Please look at the sample of the journals. The journal is, it's an easy 10 points. You hand it in, you'll get the 10 points. You don't hand it in, you won't get the points. And if you just put one sentence for every session we had, you won't get the points. Each journal entry should have what we did, what you read. I know we've been veering off the book, but we're reading the last chapters of the book this week, the textbook. Remember that? Um, I'm going to talk about further about that later on this week. Uh, we'll have a discussion too, how to end it, the book that is, and what we did in the discussions, maybe possibly what you learned, or what you didn't learn. It's called a reflection journal. So do some reflecting. This should be 15 to 17 entries. Each entry is a paragraph long. The paragraph is like 5 or 6 sentences. You decide. Anyway, that's it. Too little, and it won't let me know that you paid attention or you were even involved in the class. Um, so please make it substantial and meaningful, and take it seriously. The other thing is look at the syllabus. I made some changes. Remember the last line in the syllabus, subject to change. I added another essay on there, so I'm adding more points. Um, these sessions are fluid, depends on how fast we could go or how slow we go, and we're kind of going pretty well, and so that's why we're doing another essay, because that's what it's all about. I got to put out a fire here. I've got incense burning and a candle, and they all caught on fire. Anyway, yeah. So don't be upset when you see extra things added, or something in the syllabus we didn't cover, or the syllabus is simply a blueprint. Hopefully, we can stay to it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I need to change it mid semester, and then I change it for the next class, which I do every. It's a work in progress. So anyway, I hope you guys aren't too stressed out about that. It's getting cold again, so hopefully you're staying warm. 2 weeks ago, it was hotter and blazes, and now we're cold. But fall is here. That's how it rolls. So tonight, I'm going to cover briefly documentaries. Do you know what a documentary is? Do you have an idea what a documentary is? Now, they've changed over the years hugely. Documentaries now are a large part of our American cinema, worldwide cinema. It's how we learn about other countries, other cultures. And a documentary is essentially an unscripted film. Some of them are what they call cinema verte. That's another French word for live in front of the camera. A great cinema verte documentary would be Grey Gardens by the Maisel brothers, or Gimme Shelter by the Maisel brothers. I'm going to show some examples. Look for them in modules. I'll post those tonight or tomorrow, and you'll see. They can be very exciting, and sometimes more exciting than a scripted film. And remember, when these got documentary filmmakers go out and film a story, Sometimes they might know a topic or a subject, but they don't know how the story's going to go. They don't even know if there's going to be a story, and sometimes there isn't. A great documentary that won all sorts of awards in the '90s called Hoop Dreams. I'll post a sample of that online. Uh, they went out and they filmed these kids, basketball players, and they were in at the time, I do believe, eighth grade in inner city. I'm thinking it's Chicago, but I'm forgetting right now. And they followed them for 5 years. They filmed them for 5 years as they advanced with their basketball skills in their dreams of being professional basketball players. And so you get to see their families, their school life, their dedication to practice, practice, practice for 5 years. But the filmmakers have no idea how it's going to end. They know they're just filming a lot of footage, and and towards the end of the film, they both have their shot at it, and they both fail. And so their hoop dreams go out the window, and our hearts go out with it because we're rooting for these kids. We want them to succeed, break out of the inner city, get some career, get some fame, and possibly some money to help their families. Not going to happen. And so you don't know where the story is going to go. It's a brilliant film. You really get involved in these families' lives and how basketball just isn't a pastime; it's a lifeline. Another documentary that's exciting called Grizzly Man, by Werner Herzog, who is also a prolific fiction filmmaker. But he films lots of documentaries when he's not doing fiction because he could get um, it doesn't cost that much to make documentaries as it does a fiction film, and he could do more of those and still keep his cinema vision going. And he usually tackles uh, a lot of natural documentaries. He filmed inside of a volcano. He went up to the Arctic Circle and scuba dived down where nobody has ever scuba dived before because not only is it colder and then holy crap and dangerous as hell, you can only stay down a few minutes even with the best equipment. It's really super dangerous. But it's uncharted waters. This is what his forte is. These extreme elements. Well, this movie's an extreme example of a guy who goes up to Alaska every single year and um, finds where the grizzly bears are feeding every year. They usually come back to the same spots, and he starts living there next to them, filming them. He's out there by himself for the most part. As long as he stays clear of them, he didn't have a problem with them. As long as the grizzlies are eating, they won't bother him. Um, and then he goes off and does these videos, and he became rather famous at the time. He was on different talk shows, David Letterman, Jay Leno. He traveled around to colleges giving lectures about the endangered grizzlies and how man was encroaching on their territory. And then it got to the point where he was obsessed with saving the grizzlies, to the point where he was naming them names and giving them cute human attributes, which was a foolish mistake on his part. Um, so then he gets kind of cocky, thinking he's going to save all grizzly bears from all of humankind, and he becomes rather wrapped up um, in an unrealistic way in the lives of these grizzlies. He thinks he's safe, um, and so he talks his girlfriend into going up there 1 week with him, and it's the biggest mistake of her life because during their night in a tent, a grizzly bear comes into the camp and attacks them, and he tries to fight the grizzly off. which is not an easy thing to do when you have no weapons. He was not a guy who was going to carry a gun. He was actually hitting the grizzly in the head with a frying pan. Folks, that's just going to piss the grizzly off more. And grizzly bears could get up to 1,500 pounds. They could get 7 feet high if they stand up on their back legs. They could run 60 miles an hour. You cannot run a grizzly, and you cannot hit them in the head with a frying pan. Rangers up there carry high-powered pistols, handguns, 50 caliber handguns, and they have to shoot them 10 times to drop them. That's how powerful a grizzly is. Well, in the movie, which is very dramatic, you can hear the audio, which they don't have. He had his camera on, but he didn't have the lens cap off, so you don't see the attack, but you hear it. But they don't. You can't hear it in the movie. They only tell you about it because it's too gruesome to listen to. But Herzog is a dramatic, charismatic filmmaker and a narrator, so his voice is very much a part of the landscape of this documentary called Grizzly Man. I will post a sample of it on Canvas. Please check it out. Um, but in the recording, you can hear the guy telling his girlfriend to run for her life. She's screaming. She takes off running. He runs another way. Well, the one grizzly grabs him and, yes, folks, kills him. And then then the grizzly turns around and goes after the woman and kills her. And the rangers show up a couple days later, and there's 5 or 6 grizzlies hanging around the campsite, and they don't know who's responsible for what, so they kill every single one of them. So the moral of the story is the thing he thought he was protecting, he ended up destroying. So, the dr- so he made a huge mistake, a fatal error. Not only did he lose his life, his girlfriend lost her life, but the beloved grizzlies lost their lives. They found out the culprit was a grizzly called Scar. He was an old warrior, starving, by the way. And a grizzly will only attack usually if they're really, really hungry. And this grizzly was not part of the usual group. He was he came in as a rogue grizzly, and all hell broke loose. And it's on this film, Grizzly Man. And if we were in class today, we'd be watching it because I used to screen it. So documentaries are really, really powerful. And in the last 15 years, they started making money at the box office. Michael Moore, filmmaker, who has usually a political bent to um, his films have proven so entertaining and humorous, even though he's dealing with serious subjects like Flint, Michigan, and how it's bankrupt and the water's poison. Um, they become very popular in the culture. And he did a movie called Fahrenheit 9/11, was a huge hit with the public about certain things in politics in Washington, and he's not afraid to put himself out there, and he's become a spokesperson, and he's also in the documentaries as the on-screen narrator. Maybe you've seen him as a heavy-set guy, always wears a baseball cap, smart, funny dude. Um, and his films started making lots of money, a lot of money, and that's rare when it comes to documentaries because most people stay away from them. And these were released to the movie theaters before this is before streaming services. So that's rare. And so studios started looking for other documentaries that could make that kind of money. Grizzly Man was one of them, Hoop Dreams. And so these were successful films. For every one of these, there's 100 that never get to see the light of day. But people like Ken Burns, who make documentaries, maybe you've seen them, Civil War, jazz, um, country music one. I can't think of the name of it. Baseball. They're they're all done on PBS. He's financed by PBS, so he doesn't have to worry about box office. They're not shown in movie theaters. PBS screens them and pays him well for these. Usually they're 5 or 6 episodes, uh, and they're quite wonderful. If you've ever seen the Civil War or baseball or jazz, you'll know what I'm saying. Um, he's probably one of the most successful documentary filmmakers. He's the Steve Spielberg of documentaries because they're very profitable and very family appropriate. So maybe you've seen a documentary and you don't even know it was a documentary. They could be as entertaining as a fiction film, but is it the truth? And that's the question you have to ask yourself. Because it's a documentary, are you seeing the truth? And if we're in class, we'd be just talking about that because people will say that documentaries are the truth. Well, you can manipulate them like everything else. You can manipulate them with editing, with music. You can imply certain things with camera technique, interviews, so you can control the story. And some people do that very thing. And so they've manipulated a story and they've bent the facts. And so maybe it's not the truth. So don't be tricked into thinking all documentaries are the holy truth. They are a vision of somebody's idea of the truth, and they are nonfiction, but there's fiction elements. Earl Morris does reenactments because he wasn't there during a lot of times where he's making these films. The Thin Blue Line's a great example where a police officer is murdered and a guy is put in prison, and it turns out the wrong guy is put in prison. And he does dramatic reenactment with actors. Is that fudging it? Is it any less truthful? Herzog does the same thing on his interviews. If he didn't like the way it's going, he said, let's do it again. Let's try it a different way. He is directing it. He's directing the flow in the story. He's directing the narrative. A great team, the Maisel brothers, who did "Gimme Shelter," which is I'll show example on YouTube or whatever on modules you could take a look at. A Rolling Stones band, rock and roll band in 1969, hadn't been on tour years. They had recently lost their original guitar player, Brian Jones. They had a new guitar player, a new record, and they wanted to go on tour again. And they were actually afraid that they didn't have a careers anymore. And you find that in the documentary, Give Me Shelter. And so they hired the Maisel brothers, um, Albert, David Maisel. One was a sound man, one's a brilliant cameraman, and to follow them on this tour. And that's what they do. Well, the tour ends in Altamont. Altamont was a rock festival that was supposedly mirroring Woodstock. It was going to be a free rock festival with the Rolling Stones, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, um, Flying Burrito Brothers, Jefferson Airplane. We're all there. Grateful Dead was supposed to be there, but they backed out. Well, what happened was in Altamont is a complete disaster. It's the defining moment which supposedly closed the door on the hippie dream. That same summer, we had Charles Manson murdering a bunch of people in the Hollywood Hills in August. Altamont was in December of the same year, and that showed hippies on LSD and on bad drugs, and violence ensued. They made the mistake, the Rolling Stones did, of hiring the Hells Angels as their security. Well, the Hells Angels, even though they're alternative types and they look like they're free spirits, are not. They're usually uptight right wing fanatics, and they went after the hippies full on, and with pool cues, pool sticks, and they beat them over the head and body, and the kids in the audience were taking bad drugs, and so their reacting is extreme. And in the milieu of them trying to perform the Rolling Stones, you can see the chaos of it all. Um, how close the audience is to them. The stage is only 4 feet high, folks. Can you imagine going to a Rolling Stones concert now? You can't even get near the stage. Um, but this is the 60s, peace and love era. Nobody's going to get hurt, except for a lot of people got hurt. And in the audience, there's a concert goer, 19 years old concert goer, trying to enjoy the concert, but he made the mistake of bringing a handgun to the concert. And he gets pissed off at the Hells Angels for pushing everybody around. And he pulls out his gun and they essentially stab him to death. It's all on camera. Now, the Rolling Stones know there's something going on, but they don't see that. They keep performing, even though this guy's getting stabbed to death. And the movie ends on this note where the Rolling Stones wanted to get out of there. They admit later that they were afraid for their lives, and the whole thing was a bloody mess. The press loved the fact that it looked like the hippies were a bunch of drug addicted losers, and the establishment, people who were the establishment in the day, people like Richard Nixon, the president, uh, went after the hippie movement full bore, and they said, "See, this is what peace and love gets you, and this is what protesting against the Vietnam War or trying to live some other life through rock and roll. This is what rock and roll will get you. It's evil." And the Maisel brothers filmed it all. It's a brilliant film, but that last 15 minutes is hard to watch. So there's some great documentaries out there. Another uh, one that was really put together recently, last 5 years, I think it is, called Five Who Came Back, put together by Steve Spielberg and Tom Hanks, about five directors. This is the last thing I'm going to say. Five directors who were Hollywood directors, famous: John Ford, John Huston, William Wyler, George Stevens, Frank Capra. They were directors who were famous already, had nice fat Hollywood careers in the 30s and 40s, and World War II broke out and they wanted to give back to their country. And so they were too old to join the army because they're all in their 50s and 60s, but they joined up anyway, and they filmed a core group of filmmakers that filmed World War II. They had the cameras at Omaha Beach. Maybe you've seen that footage. If you've seen Saving Private Ryan, that's where he got all that. Spielberg watched that footage and copied it. Um, Lots of cameramen were killed on Omaha Beach. Most of the footage was lost because the cameras were falling in the water. They were being machine gunned, but some footage did survive. In the meantime, in the Pacific, John Ford was filming the Battle of Midway, which was the defining battleship battle between Japan and America, where Japan was using kamikaze pilots to fly into the American ships. John Ford filmed that, and he was wounded in action. Got two Purple Hearts, actually. Uh, these guys put their life on the line to film the war. George Stevens filmed the first concentration camp, the liberation of the concentration camp, and he filmed the bodies. We hadn't seen it before. We knew something was happening. We hadn't seen it like this before, and it was devastating. Um, William Wyler was another one, and another film director. And so when these guys came back, they gave up their careers, folks. They weren't getting paid. They got military pay, which is about 50, 60 bucks a month. And these were Hollywood types, pretty well off. A couple of them had already won the Academy Award, but they felt they had to give something back to the country. A lot of Hollywood actors, I'll put this up on YouTube too, volunteered for the services during World War II. Famous actors like Clark Gable and James Stewart, Tyrone Power, they joined the military. They put their Hollywood careers on hold. And I always ask people in class, we're not in class right now. We've had a couple wars recently, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. Can you imagine Brad Pitt or Johnny Depp or Bradley Cooper or any of the Ryans joining the military, giving their careers up to go fight for what they think is a good cause? There was a celebrity of sorts who did this. Uh, Tillman, the football player, and they made a documentary about it. It's the last thing I'm going to say tonight before I let you go. He he had just got signed to a $3 million a year contract to be a football player. When 9/11 happened, he was so wanting to do something for his country that he joined the military, and he was killed in action. Threw up $1 million career, threw it away. Gave his life for his country. But when the press got a hold of it and the politics got a hold of it, they lied about how he died. This comes out in the documentary. George Bush Jr. used the Tillman story as propaganda to rally the country around the righteousness of his decision to invade Iraq and go after Saddam Hussein, which was all fabricated. There was no weapons of mass destruction. He wasn't even responsible for 9/11. Osama bin Laden was. Yes, we got him, but was it for another 10 years? So Pat Tillman threw his life away, but he didn't die a hero like the White House said he did. Well, they found out he was shot from behind by friendly fire. His own troops killed him by accident, folks. Warfare is brutal. A lot of our guys get killed by accident, not by the enemy, but by the gunfire coming from behind or overhead or bombs being dropped. The casualties of war, collateral damage, a lot of it is our own guys. Once his family found out that the Bush White House was using it for propaganda to prop up the war, they came out in the press and they said, they're using our son as propaganda. Don't let them do it. And so that's where the truth was. And it's in that documentary. So people use real life to manipulate for propaganda uses for whatever gain. And so documentaries can expose that. They can add to the fakeness of it. They can. And so, like everything else, you just have to take a documentary or a good novel or a good nonfiction book or great film and you really have to look at it critically. That's why I keep telling you with these essays, look at things critically. Why? More later when the story film continues.